Okay, we are on Daf 152, and we have a beautiful Agadah about growing old. It's somewhat sad, also somewhat heartwarming, and a few parts of it are fun as well. So we begin with a continuation of a midrash on Kohelet. Kohelet, chapter 12, the very end of Kohelet, says that remember your creator when you're young, before old age, and then has a few pasukim describing what it's like to become old, before the sun and light and moon and stars grow dark and the clouds come back again after the rain, when the guards of the house become shaky and the men of valor are bent, and so on. And so that's what we're going to start off with. Bayom sheyazu shomerei habayit vehit avetu. The keepers of the house shall tremble, the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out of the windows shall be dim. So these are all metaphors, and the Gemara is going to unpack these metaphors. Elo hakesalim v'aselaot behit v'selaot. So this refers, the first phrase refers to the person's flesh and ribs that get saggy. This refers to person's thighs that grow weaker. And that refers to the grinders, refers to the teeth that decay and fall out, and windows dimmed. The windows of a person are his eyes, and people lose their eyesight when they grow old. All right, now we take a break here, and we have a little story. The Roman emperor asked Rabbi Yoshua, "Why didn't you come to this place called Be'avidan?" We saw Be'avidan a while ago, and it's a place of studying philosophy. Lots of different people. It was in Babylonia, and people from different religions and ethnicities would come and study there. And some rabbis also attended. They had a library. So Caesar's asking, "Why didn't you come?" Amale tur telag seharuni gilidin kalbohi la nabchin tahanohi la tohanin be'rav amre adela abenda behashna. So he says the snowy mountain is surrounded with ice. In other words, my hair has turned white. The dog does not bark. My voice can barely be heard. Grinders, meaning my teeth, have fallen out. And in the school of Rav, they add, I'm in search for that which I have not lost. In other words, an old person is always bent over as if he's looking for something, even though they didn't lose anything. So he's making an excuse. Why didn't he come to this place to study? He says, I'm too old. It's difficult for me to get there. I don't know if that's really the reason, or he's making an excuse to the emperor because he didn't want to be there on principle. But anyway, he's describing similarly the symptoms of old age. Tanya, Rabbi Yosef bar Kisma Omer, Taba tere mitelat. Better 2 than 3. Well, usually you think 3 is better than 2, but 2 means two legs that you use when you're young. 3 is the 3 legs when you have to use a cane, and so 2 is better than 3. Baila la hadad azla vela atya. Maihi amarachista yankuta. Right, woe to that which goes and never comes back. And what does that refer to? Youth. Youth goes away and never comes back. Youth is the crown of roses, and old age is a crown of thorns. So some good health advice: to grind your food, chew your food very well, and it will sustain your whole body and give you a spring in your step. All right, it's good advice all the time, especially in old age. Amale Shemuel Rav Yehuda Shinana Sheresh Sakaich Ve'ayilachmach. Medical advice: untie your sack and open your, Shemuel was a doctor, right? And I mean, you open your mouth and put the food in. Sometimes people, when they're elderly, lose their appetite. So important to just eat. Until 40 years old, food is good. From then on, drinking is good. Perhaps because people lost their teeth or difficult to digest, so then drinking is better. Amar le, Ahu goza'al Rabbi Yoshua ben Kodha. Mehacha lekadchina kama have. Okay, now we leave the subject of old age for a minute, and we have these two people who are making fun of each other. One of them is a eunuch, a apostate eunuch. That's a goza'ah. So it tells Rabbi Yoshua ben Kodha. Kodha, to be kereach, is to be bald. So we have a eunuch and a bald person. So he says, the eunuch says, how far is it to get from here to Kadchina? Kadchina is just a play on bald. He's like, how far from here to Baldy Town, right? In other words, making fun of him for being bald. So his answer is, oh, it's the same distance from here to Eunuch Town, right? Okay. So the eunuch says, a bald goat is only worth 4 dinar, right? That's all you're worth. He said, well, a castrated goat is sold for 8. Right? He says, okay, if we're going to go by, the amount that we would be worth for animals, okay, yeah, you're better because that meat is very good. So you'd make a good meal. Okay, you win on the better animal front. So, in another version, he says that it's the eunuch that says both. He says, you're only worth 4, but if I were a eunuch goat, I would be worth 8. So this eunuch saw that Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha was not wearing shoes. So someone who rides on a horse, he's a king. Someone who rides on a donkey, that's a free person. Someone who just walks on his own and wearing shoes, that's a human being. But to be barefoot is worse, so much worse. How worse? How much worse? If you don't have any of those, you don't ride on a horse or a donkey, and you don't have shoes, then being the person buried in the earth is better. In other words, the degradation to walk barefoot is so terrible. Better not to be alive. And you're walking barefoot, he tells this rabbi. Amale, goza, telat amart li, telat shemat. This is you, eunuch. You insulted me 3 times. I'm going to now insult you 3 times. Hadrat panim zaken, simchat leb isha. He said the glory of a face is a beard. And the eunuch, he doesn't have testosterone hormone, so he doesn't grow a beard. So you don't have a beard. And I guess most people did have beards. And the joy of one's heart is to be with one's wife, and obviously the eunuch is reproductively challenged and can't do that. Nachalat Hashem banim baruch hamakom shemenach mikulam. And to have inheritance of God, that's to have children. And so praises God that you don't have any of those. That's what he tells the eunuch. Amale karha misuyana. He said, the eunuch said, does a bold man quarrel? He said to him back, does a castrated male speak of rebuke? Okay, so that's a nice exchange of barbs between these two individuals. All right, and now another story. Let it be Shimon ben Halafta. Rabbi says, how come I didn't come to visit you on the holiday? What he really means is, why didn't you come to visit me on the holiday? But he's saying it in a nice way, right? And the way my ancestors visited your ancestors. He means, your family always used to visit my family in generations past. How come you didn't visit me? He said, the little rocks in the road have become tall. In other words, have become old. And now it's difficult to go uphill, up steps. and it's difficult to come to you. Kerubim na'asu rechokim, paths that were short now are far away from me. Mishetayim na'asu shalosh, from 2 feet now I have to walk with a cane, and now I have 3. Mesim shalom babayit batel, and that which brings peace to the house is no more. In other words, physical intimacy with my spouse is no more. That's not a reason why I can't come, but another description of old age. The sugeru de latayim bashuk. But now we go back to Kohelet, and the doors are shut in the marketplace. The sounds of grinding is low. One shall start up at the voice of a bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. That's the pasuk. So the beginning talks about Elu nekavav shel adam, the doors being shut. That's a person's orifices that are shut, and the digestive system does not work as well as when someone was young. Ishval kol tahana b'shpil kul kevan she'eno tochen. As the grinding is low, is the stomach. It doesn't digest the food as well. That elderly people can sleep so deeply, and even a chirping bird wakes them up. וישחו כל בנות השיר, שאפילו כל שירים ושירות אומרת עליו כשוחה. And even the voices of male and female singers sound like conversation. In other words, person loses their hearing. I think these are pretty depressing midrashim, and because we're all on our way there, but in a way kind of comforting that 2,000 years ago, the rabbis are meditating about the difficulties of old age, and thankfully we I think bear it much better with modern medicine. So it's nice to have people from the past to sympathize.
Sorry, Rabbi.
Yeah.
They define old age at what age? 50,
right.
45?
Right. Well, it sounds like after 40, like you're a lost cause. So I think those of us here that are over 40 can sympathize. Things start not working the same way as when you're 20. But thankfully, most people today can make it much longer in good health with their teeth. With we have much better ways of dealing with this. So without all that, sight, hearing. I mean, it's just I think it must have been very, very difficult back then to get old. Okay, so here's like kind of upper limit in the olden days. In those days, if someone lived till 80 back then, that's like 110 nowadays. So it says Barzilai, who was a strong warrior, said, I'm 80 years old. I can't tell the difference between good and bad. Meaning, like a child, he can't think straight. Right, the minds of elderly people change. And he continues, Barzilai, and says, I can't even eat or drink. That the lips, the palate of all elderly people crack. I can barely even hear singing, and you see that people become hard of hearing when they're elderly. This conversation happens to be when David was expecting Barzilai to come in support, and Barzilai is giving excuses why he couldn't come. And so again, like one of the previous stories, it's hard to tell if he really couldn't come, or is he using his old age as an excuse for why he couldn't come. But in either case, it's an accurate description of what growing old was like. Amarav, Barzilai Giladi Shakara Hava. Rav says Barzilai was a liar. It's not true that a person becomes so debilitated. Because there's a maidservant in the house of the Yehuda Nasi. She was 92 years old, and she was still taste the cooking, and she tasted just fine, right? So, okay, there's an even older person. So, like, this is like maybe the oldest person around. 92. רבה אמר ברזילי גלעדי שטוף בזימה ובכל שטוף בזימה זקנה קופצת עליו. They're now going to rag on Barzilai. He was involved in all kinds of sexual immorality when he was young, and because of that, he became took away from his strength, and that's why he got old early. Tanya Rabbi Ishmael Rabbi Yosef Omer Tamidah Chamim Kol Zman Shemazchinin Chochma Nitosefet Bahen Shneimar Bishishim Chochma V'Rechamim Tebuna. Sage scholars, the older they get, the wiser they get, right? The more knowledgeable they get. Whereas people who are ignoramuses, the older they get, the more ignorant, the ignorance even increases. Back to Kohelet, that they're afraid of heights. For an elderly person, even a small bump in the road seems to be something very high. Everything is scary in the road, terrors in the road, right? I mean, it's true, elderly people have to be careful if they fall. And so even a little bump in the concrete could be terrorizing. Ve'yanetz hashaked zo keliboset v'istabed ha'hagab elu agabot v'tafel biyona zo chemda. And the almond tree will blossom. That's the hip bone that protrudes, and the grasshopper drags itself. This is the one's bottom that becomes heavy, and the caper berry shall fail. That's a person's desire for intimacy that ceases. Now, regarding this pasuk, Rav Kana was once reading these pasukim and the last chapter of Kohelet in front of Rav, in this pasuk in particular. When it got to this pasuk, Rav sighed. They said, I might learn from this that Rav lost his desire for physical intimacy. Amar Rav Kahana, my dichtiv ki hu amar vayehi zo isha hu siva ve'amod elu banim. Rav Kahana's point here is that logically, it really doesn't make sense for a person to get married and have children. It's a big expense, a lot of work, and so why would anybody do it? It's because Hashem commanded and placed within people's minds a desire for it. God said, "Vayehi," right? Be. This is referring to being with women, and Sivavi Amod. This refers to children. I think he's saying this in a way that get people to put their desires in proper perspective, and that's certainly the point of the next statement. Tana Isha Haimet Maleh So'a Ufiha Maleh Dam Akol Rasin Achaleha. A woman lies like a flask full of feces and a mouth full of blood, and all that nida, and yet everybody runs after her. So if you look at it in that perspective, then hopefully people will not be so materialistic. Okay, I don't know if men's bodies are any cleaner or any better great shakes. I think that's his point, is that people should act better. Ki holech adam el bet olamo. And so continuing Kohelet, person goes to his eternal home. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak melamed shekol sadik v'sadik notin lo madod lifnei kevodo. He says each person goes to his own home in the world to come, not just the world to come, but his own. That teaches that everybody gets their own apartment, their own appropriate to their ranking, to what they deserve. A king and his entourage, for example, come into a city. They all come into the same gate together. But when they go and stay, then the king gets the nicest, gets the presidential suite, and then the lowly guard gets a lower one. So too, in life, everybody enters the world equal status, but after people die, they receive the appropriate reward or otherwise. אמר רבי יצחק, מה דכתיב כי הילדות והשחרות הבל, דברים שאדם עושה בילדותו, והשכינים פניו לעת זקנתו. What does that mean when it says childhood and youth are vanity, that the sins that one makes in his youth are dark in his face, a person is shameful about them when he grows old? That's a psychological explanation. You can also explain that if a person has a lot of physical intimacy when he's young, it reduces his physical strength. ואמר רבי יצחק, קשר עמה למת כמחט בבשר חי, שנאמר לך בשרו עליו יכאב. He said that the worms that eat away at a body are painful to the person like needles. Pasuk in the Yob, his flesh is in pain for him, his soul mourns over him. It sounds like even after a person is dead, they're still feeling it. In fact, the soul of the person doesn't completely leave for 7 days, and the soul itself is mourning for the body. And I mean, this is, partly explains the custom of sitting Shiva to try to give it consolation. As they mourned for their father, for Yaakov, for 7 days. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, met she'en lo menachamim holchin 10 bnei adam yoshvim bimkomo. What if a person dies and he has no one to comfort him, no one to sit for him? A person happens a lot. Someone has no children, or doesn't. We're very lucky. We live in a wonderful community where where everybody knows a million people, but I've seen that happen, especially in Manhattan. People live alone and they don't have families, and they die, and there's no one around to remember them. And so this is then a communal responsibility that 10 people from the community should go and sit Shiva in his home. And I feel like this is such a beautiful halacha. It's like these little halachot that come up and are so deeply insightful. And I don't know if we would be so sensitive to think about these things, without the system of halacha that the Talmud has, to think of the communal responsibility to remember each and every member. And when there's no family to do it, then it's our collective responsibility to do something to memorialize. Okay. In fact, there was a person who died in the neighborhood of Yehuda, and there were no mourners, no family. And so the rabbi would take 10 people every day and sit in the house. And after 7 days, the soul of that deceased person came to him in a dream and said, you can put your mind at rest because you put me to rest properly. Okay, beautiful. Anything you say in front of the dead body, it knows, it's listening until you seal up the stone. Those days they would often put the bodies inside a tomb, like a cave. And so they put the body in and have a big stone that they rolled over the opening. So that's what's called a golel, because they roll it. So as long as you're dealing with the body next to it, it can hear it until the process is finished and you roll it closed. In fact, a subject to dispute. One opinion says until you close the grave. The other opinion says until the flesh decomposes, which would be later on. The first opinion will quote that same pasuk, or the second opinion, the one that says until the flesh is decomposed. We'll quote the pasuk from Eov that we had earlier. And the other one will quote a pasuk from Kohelet, chapter 12, our section, that dust returns to earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God. In other words, when the body returns to earth, then it will go. So once it's closed, the body is in the earth. And so you don't have to wait till it decomposes, it's already in the earth. Kohelet continues and says that the spirit of a person returns to God who gave it. This is good advice. God gave each person a pure soul. We should return it also pure. Now here's a parable. A king gave clothing to all of his servants. Clean, nice clothing. Smart ones kept it in a safe spot, all nice and folded. The stupid people went and used it for as work clothing and got it all dirty. And then he wanted it back. He was giving it to him to hold, to hang on for him, to watch for him. Small ones gave it back all nice and ironed and clean. And the stupid ones gave it back to the king, all full of dirt. He was happy at the wise people. He got angry at the foolish people. For the smart people, he said, take the clothes and put them back in the treasure house and let them go home peacefully. Stupid people took the clothing and said, you got to go launder it, and they will go to prison. So the nimshal is obvious. אף הקדוש ברוך הוא על גופן של צדיקים אומר, יבוא שלום, ינוחו משכבותם. במשפטים הוא אומר, ותנפש אדוני סרורה בשרור החיים. And so too, God says about the bodies of righteous people, let them go be rest in the treasure house, rest in the ground, and their neshama, which is like the keeper, like their servant, will continue on in peace. Quoting pasuk from Shemuel, which is, we can look at it together. Second. This is said by Abigail to David when she's trying to save her husband's life, and she says, "V'tenevesh Adoni seruya Adoni serura besor ha'chaim et Adonai Elohecha v'et nevesh oibecha yikale'ena betoch kaf hakala." So she's giving a blessing to David and says, if anyone sets out to pursue you and seek your life, the life of my Lord, meaning you, David, will be bound up in the bundle of life. If you're in a fight, you should live. But he will fling away the souls of your enemies as from the hollow of a sling. So you see in the Peshat, it means to be bound up in the chain of life means that you will live and not die, as opposed to, as he's saying, his enemies, they should be flung out. That's the Peshat. But the Midrash is taking it as meaning both after death, that the soul should continue in its in afterlife. And the opposite of Gufan Shel Reshaim hu omer, En Shalom Amar Hashem L'Reshaim, Mishpatan omer, V'nefesh oibecha yikada'ena betoch kaf hakela. So, to those who were wicked, right, they have no peace. Their bodies have no peace, and their neshamot also get thrown around like a sling. We'll see more about that. Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer omer nishmatan shel tzadikim genuzot tachat kisei hakavod. The souls of righteous people, they reside beneath God's throne. The same pasuk that we just read. But for those of evil people, they are going to be tied up continually. And two angels play a very long game of catch with it, slinging it from one to the other, quoting the same pasuk, that their soul should be slung out with a slung, and so that would be very painful for them. Okay, you told me about the righteous and the wicked. What about people in the middle? Says, if I were dead, I wouldn't be able to tell you, because, if he was dead, he wouldn't be able to speak to him. But he says, luckily, I do know a tradition that I learned from Shemuel. In fact, both people in the middle and wicked people, both are handed over to Duma, the angel in charge of the underworld. The people in the middle can rest. They don't rest under God's throne, but they can rest with Duma. But the evil people, they have no rest. Mari said, all bodies return to dust. Even the Sadiqim, right? Even Sadiqim return to dust, as a continuation of that same pasuk in Kohelet we're dealing with. Okay, now we have a story. Anhu kafula is grave diggers. Davu kafle barad Rab Nachman. They were digging a grave in the land of Rab Nachman. Nehar behu Rab Achai bar Yoshia. And suddenly, Rab Achai got angry at them. He was buried there. He was dead, and they uncovered his grave. And this dead sage got up and started yelling at them. They went to Rab Nachman, whose field it was. He says, I don't know what's going on. There's someone in the graveyard. He's angry at us. So they go to him and says, who are you? That's says his name. So Rab Nachman quotes the statement that we just said by Rab Mari. It says, we learned that even righteous people, their bodies decompose. So how could you be here with your body and be still composed? This is Mari, right? He's from older. I never heard of Mari. What do I care what Mari said? You're giving me a halachic argument why I can't exist. I'm here. Okay, fine, forget Mari. Mari quoted a pasuk. The pasuk in Kohelet, it says a person will return to dust as they are. You're not allowed to violate a pasuk. I see you learn Kohelet, but your teacher never taught you Mishle. Because there, if it says, that envy, jealousy rots the bones. Someone who has envy, right, and feel envy, person's, their bones are shaking, and so that person, their bones rot. But someone who has never had envy, his bones don't rot, and I never was envious of anyone, and therefore, right, that's why I follow the pasuk in Mishle. So Nachman touched him and saw he's not just a hologram. He actually has flesh. So he said, "Oh, why don't you come over? Right? You must have not eaten for a while. So right, come stay with me." Right? He says, now I see you didn't study anything. You didn't even study Nevi'im. Because then you will know that I am Shem when I open your graves and lift you up out of your graves, Yechezkel said. So the point is that you have to wait till the time is right when God will bring the end of days and take the dead out of their graves. But until then, I have to stay here. Okay, fantastic story. I love how the dead person is arguing halachot and from different pisukim about the possibility of him even being there. Oh, it still goes. He says, there's another pasuk that you're violating, right? How dare you be here? You have to, says, you come from the dust, you have to return to the dust. Amazing. He says that refers only to 1 hour before that the metim will happen. In other words, in order to be recreated anew, right? You don't want to have this old body, it's all dusty and old model, but you want a new one. So that's the zechut that they never, these great people who never had envy, they never decompose, but when it comes time for Tchiat Metim, they do merit to have a renewed body. So apostate says, you say that the souls are under the throne. If so, how did the oracle woman raise up Shemuel, right, in the Witch of Endor story? How could that happen? It was within 12 months. During the 12 months after a person is deceased, the soul, the body remains, but the soul is going up and down and still traveling. After 12 months, the body, I mean, that's after the usual amount of usual time for decomposition, and then the soul can go and rest wherever it goes. And so when they brought up the Shemuel from the dead, it was within 12 months when they were still traveling and able to do that. And this is again then one of the sources for our custom that during that we'll say Kaddish and still some mourning for 12 months because that the soul is still not at rest. And we will rest our learning for today here. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen. Amen.